get this show on the road. All righty. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the May 25th installment of the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force. We are excited to be here with you. I am Jevin Hodge of the Link Strategic Partners team, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Jamal, Cordell, Michael, Jacqueline, and we are excited and motivated to continue the charge. So as we get started today, Jacqueline, I'm going to ask you to bring up the deck for us. As we get started today, we're going to go over our timeline once again, and we have some announcements for you. We have some subject matter experts to have a great conversation with you all, and then we will break into subcommittees, the latter end of this meeting. And from there, we will have some good, strong discussion with the subcommittee experts, respectfully with the subcommittees. So this is great. All righty, Jacqueline, next slide. Before we get started here, I want to take a moment of silence. Today marks the anniversary of the death of George Floyd, and I want to acknowledge his passing and everything that has occurred over the last year and years previous. So please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you all. The purpose of this task force is to reimagine public safety in the city of Takoma Park. We're going to work together to make recommendations to make Takoma Park a safer, more livable community for all residents, with an emphasis on addressing racial inequities that exist in government and services evolve around public safety. This is our time to come together and have those conversations and build to make our community stronger. Next slide, please. You see the timeline here. We've extended it out. Today is the 25th of May. We will have our public listening session tomorrow. And so please feel free to share information with folks so that they can log in and participate and be part of the discussion. And as you see, we have a full calendar built out for the month of June. If you have any questions about that, please send them our way. Next slide, Jacqueline. Public comment form is located on the Takoma Park website. And so please send that form far and wide so that folks can provide public comment on the process. Jamal, as always, will drop this link into the chat for you to copy and paste and text, email, Facebook Messenger, tweet to your people, folks that you have around you. Next slide. Our community listening session is tomorrow, May 26th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Please, next slide, share the flyer far and wide, post it on Facebook, send it to your friends, text it to folks. We will follow up with that again so that you have that at the top of your email inbox. Or you can send them to register at bit.ly/Takoma Public Safety 2. They can register for the event there and participate and receive their link. Next slide. All righty. Before we jump into the subject matter experts, we're going to, we have a special announcement from our Deputy City Manager. Jessica, are you here with us? Oh,
Jeff, she's not on yet. We'll come back to her.
Wonderful, wonderful. Is the chief with us?
Nope.
Wonderful. What we'll do is we'll come back to that, and
okay, yeah, here, let me I'll message them.
There we go.
Jevin, do you need me to stop sharing so we can
put
their announcements?
Yep.
All right.
All righty. All righty. Well, then what we will do is we'll jump right into the introduction of our subject matter expert.
We have the deputy city manager now. So Jessica, if you're able to jump in, go for it.
I'm sorry, I just signed on to the meeting, so where are we?
Got it.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. We wanted to leave space for you to talk about the business outreach that you'd been doing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. First of all, Molly, or Jackie, if you're on, Donna Wright can't get into the meeting, so if you wouldn't mind resending the invite to her. Yeah, so we are very excited. Our two business associations have been helping us get the word out to all of our businesses about the community listening session tomorrow. One of them actually had a board meeting today, and our economic development director, Samira Cook Gaines, was on that meeting and gave everyone a reminder. So we've sent out multiple email blasts. So hopefully we'll get some businesses to join us tomorrow evening. But also talking with the business associations, they said that 6:30 at night is actually a difficult time for some of our business owners. It's not the most convenient time for them. So we would still like to move forward with setting up a focus group with them. And the heads of our business associations have said that they have some business owners who have been asking about this process and would really like to be a part of that. So we're going to set that up hopefully next week. The other thing too is that one of the heads of our business associations said that actually, we'll be able to get a group together for the focus group. But a lot of the business owners can't even get away for that. So the best way that she knows to get word out to the business owners about this process and to get their input is to actually go door to door to the businesses. And she says she obviously does that regularly. And she would be happy to facilitate that if a couple members of the task force were interested in doing that. So I wanted to put that out there, and that would be at the crossroads, going door to door to talk to some of our businesses about public safety. So, but yeah, they're excited about it. So it'll probably be 3 different opportunities for getting their input. And we also told them about the online survey.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Jessica, for your report out, and thank you for the outreach that you all are doing for business community members. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jamal to introduce the subject matter experts.
Awesome. Thank you, Jevin. Thank you, Deputy City Manager Clark, for that overview. And we'll brainstorm as a subcommittee or as a group, task force members, to figure out ways we can engage the business community and do some of that door-to-door networking and get their input out, as I know that's important for some of us and the recommendations that we've been putting together. So next, to jump into our subject matter experts that we'll spend much more time with in our breakout rooms and having thorough discussions with. I want to give an opportunity for the subject matter experts who are here today to introduce themselves and give an overview of who you are, the work you do, and kind of your vision for reimagining public safety. And let's keep that to about 3 minutes. And we'll be able to jump into breakout rooms to have a deeper discussion with task force members. So I'll kick it off first with Ms. Dara Baldwin to give us an overview of who you are and what you do.
Oh, thank you, Jamal. Peace and blessings, everyone. My name is Dara Baldwin. I'm the Director of National Policy for the Center for Disability Rights. We are a CIL, which is a Center for Independent Living, non-residential centers where people with disabilities go for services. And part of our core outreach is advocacy. My CIL is located in Rochester, New York, but I live and work in Washington, D.C., DC statehood, DC statehood. I say every time I talk. Thank you for having me. Jomana and I are very good friends, and we work together closely. So I work in disability justice, which centers Black, Indigenous people of color. It is different from disability rights. Disability justice has 10 principles, the first one being intersectionality, and the 10th one being collective liberation. And I work in a space to end racism and all systems of oppression. And in that work, I work in what we call transformative justice reform. And in that includes, of course, engaging on law enforcement. We also do not really adhere to the concept of reimagining, something that we never had. Black, Indigenous people of color have never had public safety. So therefore we just say, let's create a public safety system, but everyone's doing their own thing. So that's fine with me. In my work for us, especially Black disabled people, right? And intersectionality, there is an African-American trans woman who is a refugee, formerly incarcerated, and has a disability, right? Those are multi-marginalizations, all parts of their lives. And what we see as public safety for our community is the ability to move around and go places and thrive and live safely without being hindered in their life in any way, shape, or form, and to be able to live with a physical, mental, spiritual space where their soul is okay, and that they can go wherever they need to go, work, worship, play, actually be at home in front of their own homes and be safe. In case you don't know, Black disabled people at a higher level are harmed and killed by law enforcement. And so we've encompassed this work for over 15 years with my center, and now I've been there for about 3 years. So I look forward to working with all of you. I work on a federal level to end these atrocities, but my CIL in New York State works on New York State level. And we have members, all 50 states, all 6 territories, and on the native lands.
Thank you, Ms. Baldwin. And we'll get the quality of life subcommittee will get the opportunity to get some questions over to Ms. Baldwin, and we'll connect with you more. Ms. Bernice, tossing it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bernice, American North. I have served for the last several months as co-chair of the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force for Montgomery County. Prior to that, I was once a Takoma Park resident, so I feel like I'm kind of welcome back home, even though it's virtually, to the city of Takoma Park. And I see a few familiar faces as well in the group. So wanted to also say that I'm a former prosecutor. I didn't work as a prosecutor in Montgomery County, but I worked in Anne Arundel County for about 6 years before going to private practice and eventually out on my own. And in terms of what reimagine public safety means, for me, it's always been looking at the root cause of criminal behavior, not just focusing on the incarceration and guilty pleas. I mean, that is a traditional sense of, as a prosecutor, what to look for when you're doing criminal cases, like, can you get the guilty plea? Can you, is there jail involved, whatnot? But I'm really always been focused on finding out the root causes of criminal behavior and how we can heal as a community from that. And that will include being more transparent, holding people more accountable, being intentional about finding alternatives to incarceration or even prosecution in cases. So those are some of the things that I envision when it comes to reimagining public safety. And I definitely hear Sister Dara's point about, some people I never really have public safety to begin with. But the interesting thing about Montgomery County, as the several months we've been doing this task force work and talking to community members, that there's some folks that, people of color that want the police, and we need to have conversations about that. I mean, there's a lot of different people in Montgomery County, and the key for this city as well as the county going forward is how do we reimagine public safety so everyone feels safe, regardless of people's backgrounds? How do we make that happen? And so that's really what I think it sounds like you guys are all tasked to do in the city of Takoma Park, and what we were doing in Montgomery County. What does public safety look like when you have all these different pockets living together in this one county?
Thank you, Ms. Bernice. And again, we'll get the opportunity once all the SMEs introduce themselves to ask a few questions before we jump into breakouts. I'll now kick it over to Mark.
Okay, well, thanks very much. I'm Mark Maurer. I recently retired as the executive director of the Sentencing Project, which is a national criminal justice reform organization based in DC. Our work over several decades has focused on challenging mass incarceration and challenging racism in the justice system. And much of that work has involved advocacy for changes in sentencing policy and practice, which have been a major contributor to the outcome that the United States is the world leader in its use of incarceration. Through that work, we've also advocated for a broader approach to public safety, one that doesn't rely on incarceration as a first step, but rather a last step if all other means have been exhausted. And we need to see a real shift there. Along with Bernice, I have been co-chairing the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force of Montgomery County. In February, our 45-member task force released its report and recommendations to the county executive and the council. It was a list of 87 separate recommendations with a broad focus on looking at law enforcement and what activities are appropriate or not appropriate for law enforcement to be engaged in. And where could we shift resources to get better, more compassionate and less harmful outcomes in a public safety strategy. And so the county and the council members and others are currently in the process of examining those recommendations and looking at implementation. And we look forward to working with them over time. And I'm also very pleased to be here. And it's great that Takoma Park is looking at similar issues and perspectives.
Mark. Donna.
Hi, I'm Donna Wright. I'm the communications specialist for the city of Takoma Park. My main responsibility is communications and engagement from the city to our residents. I basically have approximately 11 touch points that I can basically roll information through. And that's everywhere from ranging from a blog, social media, emails, also e-blast, and we also have a city TV radio that we share information on weekly. And we work on our website and trying to make sure that we have the most up-to-date content for residents to be able to understand all the different departments and functions and programs that they offer. I've been with the city approximately 2.5 years, and I basically work for the city administration, city council, and also the departments. And that's basically my role. And I'm hoping you can help me with engaging all of our residents across the city, as it's a very difficult job. It's something I research, look at trends, talk to people. I think being out in the community is probably the best in person, but unfortunately I'm a department of one, and I also do graphic design, and I also do all the writing and for the content for social media and the web. So it's a pretty busy job, and if I'm out in the field, I'm not always here. I do have a part-time intern that helps on social media as well, and she's really amazing. So that's great. And I do have, with our budget approval, I was slated for one person this upcoming year, which starts July. So I'm very excited for that. So anyways, very nice to meet you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Donna. And finally, Deputy Chief Powell.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. My name is Andrew Powell. I'm the Deputy Chief for the City of Takoma Park. I've been with the organization for about 2 years now. I came here in 2019. I retired from a municipality in Prince George's County. My job for the City of Takoma Park is to oversee the daily operations of the agency and to ensure that our officers are performing their duties within the framework of constitutional policing. I became a subject matter expert and pretty much the premier subject matter expert in the state of Maryland for discipline about 12 years ago, where I started conducting internal investigations for my agency. When the attorneys who prosecute these type of hearings saw the kind of work that I did, they asked me to start joining forces with them to teach proper internal investigative techniques throughout the state. My nickname quickly took hold. I started to develop policies for allied agencies. I worked for the Maryland Police Training Commission, and I've conducted hearing boards throughout the state of Maryland for disciplinary procedures. I've conducted about 40 at this time. That's more than anybody in the state of Maryland, presently operating as a police officer. I still conduct them. I recently did one for the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. And I try to bring that knowledge when I can, wherever I can, to officers throughout the state to make sure that we protect the constitutional rights of all people and hold ourselves accountable to the community and to the community standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Powell. We'll open it up for a few questions, Q&A for that panel before we jump into breakouts to have a deeper discussion on some of the subject matter related issues. But before I do so, Deputy City Manager Clark, just so you come off mute, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that if any of the task force members are interested in doing a ride along with one of our patrol officers, we're happy to set that up. And we discussed that with Chief today. So just let us know if you're interested in doing a ride along around the city. And how we set that up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Did you ask me a question? You just blinked out.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I muted myself. I half muted myself. Yeah. Did you want to talk a little bit about what a ride along entails?
Basically, you could just fill out a form, say you want to ride along with the agency. We'll set it up, let us know the hours you'd like to work. And you would ride along with the officer on his tour duty and be an observer for that day. And you can see the kind of calls we get, how we respond to calls, and how our officers interact with the community.
Thanks. Yeah, and Captain Frischkorn's also here. Was he able to do an introduction earlier?
It was
Yeah,
not.
sorry. I was just about to Captain, would you like to introduce yourself? Sorry.
Yeah, I've been at previous meetings. I'm a captain in charge of the patrol division. Been with the department for 32 years. So I started here when I was 18. I worked through all the different, I was in our communications. I was a dispatcher. That's what I started off at. I was a detective. I was in charge of the detectives. I was in our plainclothes unit. So I have a lot of experience with the city and the functioning of not only how the city operates, but the police department. So very knowledgeable with the different areas in the police department. If you have any questions about everything from use of force, I'm one of our instructors, to patrol procedures or investigative stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. So let's open it up for Q&A before we jump into our breakout room session. So we got about 10 minutes for Q&A, 10 to 15. Who wants to jump us off, or who has any questions for any of these subject matter experts, the work they do, and or their relation to to Reimagine Public Safety, as we do have some folks who led task force in this conversation. So any questions? See Jumana.
Yeah, hi. So well, let me put my hand back down. So I guess this is like a leading question, because I wanted to ask Dara a question, because I hear you talk about a lot of different things, but I think in particular, as a task force, we've talked a lot about, and we've even heard from community members about having ways to address questions, not just on mental illness, but people who have kids who have just different abilities, have autism, who have other kinds of behavior that can be seen or interpreted poorly, maybe by law enforcement, about how to think about giving those families the support they need without having them involve necessarily law enforcement or an entity that doesn't know how to process or interact with people with different kinds of abilities. And so the question I want to ask is, I think we always go to mental health, but I know I've heard you talk about there's a lot more than mental health in terms of interactions, and how we should be sort of thinking about that, approaching that, and what we should be considering.
Or Jumana, thank you for your question. And it's correct. Whenever people talk about not just law enforcement, but the criminal justice system and disabilities, they always push up mental health. And just so you know, according to the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, this is very simple. A disability is anything that hinders your everyday life. So if you can't speak, can't swallow, can't see, can't hear, all of those things. And so in our data, which is anecdotal data and data that we all try to collect, because no one really collects this data, it's also very difficult to collect, because also in the ADA, people don't have to disclose their disability to the law enforcement. So, but in that work, we have a lot of people on the ground who do this, and we see at a higher rate, disabled folks are either pulled over in their cars, those who drive, or on the streets, stop and frisk. And so some disabilities that people don't think about, specifically deaf people in our community, they cannot understand commands because they can't hear them. And there are several programs around the country. When President Obama did his 21st century policing, we tried to talk to DOJ about this. Over in Europe, police officers use what's called a light system. They will put a light on their vest, and they are trained kind of like a SOS system. Really, it's sign language, but in light form. And the community is taught this too. And so they learn how to communicate with deaf people. And it really has brought down the harm and killing of deaf people, people who are also hard of hearing. And I want people to understand and know there are people who are born with disabilities and people who have onset disabilities, which means later in life you have it, right? And a lot of the people who are hard of hearing are our vets. Because they come back from war or come back from service. Even those who don't go to war, there are vets who you're still considered a vet because we are still in a state of war since 2003, if something happens to you on the base and it causes you to lose your hearing or lose something, right? Your ability to talk or communicate. We have people who don't communicate in ways of talking. ASL, American Sign Language, and there are different forms of sign language so people know. And I would love to talk to communications person Donna to make sure things are accessible. That's the other thing. Information that's sent out to our community is usually never accessible. So usually like meetings like this, they don't have an ASL interpreter unless someone asks for it. Closed captioning. And the reason people use that is not just deaf and hard of hearing people who use ASL or who use closed captioning. Many people with developmental disabilities, mental health diagnoses, all kinds of disabilities use ASL and closed captioning because they just don't want to talk to people. Or like myself, I'm from Jersey, you can't tell, we speak fast. And so they're like, Dad, I can't keep up with you. And so sign language interpreter can do that for them, or closed captioning, they can read behind you and what's happening. But that's a form of communications we don't see. We see meetings like this when they're in person. People won't put things in large print. Many of our people have, right, they can't see, they have low vision. We see communities that won't put things in Braille. There are people who still use Braille and it should be used. We see people who don't think that people who are quadriplegic or paraplegic, right, even have I've seen, and we have these stories, but I've been out with my friends, when they ask a police officer for directions or just anything, and the police officer is like, why are you here? Why are you out here? You shouldn't even be in public, because of the history of disabilities. So in case you don't know, 1876 were the first ugly laws in this country created in San Francisco. And what those said was that people with disabilities are not to be in public spaces. And those laws trickled all the way around the world. They still exist in 17 countries in this world, specifically Russia, most of the Eastern country, Poland, right? Belarus, we're talking about now. And so that concept and those things still simmer within our own country and within our own ways and policies, which we do think. The other part of the ADA, many people think the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, is about accessibility, doors and ramps. It's not. The center of the ADA is community integration. Because of those ugly laws and because of the racist and ableist New Deal that Franklin Delano Roosevelt put in place, in there, he created institutions. And that is why when people were born with disabilities, they went straight into an institution from the New Deal. So anyway, that concept and those thoughts continue to go down into our public safety. So that's when I say we can't reimagine public safety, because disabled folks never had public safety. And I'm not saying we don't want police officers. There's some of us who don't. I'm an abolitionist, won't lie to you, but that's to come in the future. And until we get there, but I do want to state language means something. And when you put reimagining in front of something that people who, like I work for, never ever have, because they were told you're not supposed to be in the public. So I tell you all those things, solutions, and you all have them. I said the Centers for Independent Living was a law passed in the late 70s through the Rehab Act. And there's a SIL in every state. There's supposed to be one, but there's many. You have really beautiful ones in Maryland you could go to, and they will supply you and help you to get ASL interpreters, to do closed captioning, and to do training. Many people don't know about disabilities, specifically law enforcement. Now you have that CIT training. They always talk about CIT training for the mental health. And if you read the rest of the statute, it says, and developmental disabilities. No one ever does the developmental disabilities. And so that's that part about people with autism who will not look you straight in the eye, who may not answer your questions when you want them to be answered. And then another resource, if you wish, is the Protection and Advocacy, which are the civil rights lawyers for people with disabilities. And you have Disability Rights Maryland is wonderful. They have offices, satellite offices throughout Maryland. And I can get you that information.
Thank you, Dara. We'll get more time with Dara as well. I hear a big dog in the background. Sounds like a Rottweiler. So Michael, tossing it over to Michael.
Yeah, quick question for Bernice. I guess for the Montgomery County Public Safety Task Force, I want to know, I know a few recommendations are possibly being implemented and are included in the budget for this year, but I wonder what's going to be done long-term, because you guys came out with a very broad set of recommendations in terms of like holding the county council and the county executive accountable for some of these things and trying to make that kind of progress.
Thank you for that question. And because that is one thing that we had stressed to the county council in terms of like next steps. And because of that, we will have a series of community forums. The last leg of the task force work was dealing with the police audit. As the timeline went, unfortunately, the police audit was not done in time for our task force to begin. So it ended up being done after we finished. So this month, I think I'm not supposed to say the date yet, but just check out information for this month. It's supposed to be the end of the month. We're supposed to have a community forum on the police audit, as well as any follow up to our recommendations. And that is not going to be the end. There's supposed to be a series of community, I say community forums. Like we're going to go over these recommendations, see how we can implement them. I think like in a 3 to 6 month time period, like every 3 to 6 months. That is what we've been told by the county. We don't have those dates set, but that is the long-term goal, as well as trying to do this, trying these recommendations, I believe within like a 3 to 5 year period, something like that. Don't quote me, but it was definitely at most 5 year period. That was also told to us. These are all things that we are certain, trust me, the folks on the task force work, Mark can attest to this. We get emails still like, so when are we meeting? Because there's an expectation that we want these recommendations to be followed through. And if they're not followed through, we want to know why. So yeah, those are the next steps. We're going to have these conversations, going to be open to the public to engage with us as to the status of the recommendations and what's going to be implemented going forward. And it's going to be within a 3 to 5 year period. Mark, if I'm incorrect in the timeline, let me know.
Yeah, no, I would just second all that Bernice said. And I think we made it clear both in our report and our conversations with the county executive and members of the council that we understand, some of these things could be implemented tomorrow. Most of them require a fair amount of work, particularly if it's structural change or changing resources in the county. And so we do expect that, a commitment to a several years long project is what the county needs. And I think Bernice and I have been very encouraged so far when our report was finalized. We had individual members with the county executive and members of the council. And I think, they may or may not have agreed with every last recommendation, but I think they're very receptive. We've had a good dialogue with them. I think there's a real commitment to making sure that the county does as much as is possible with what we've given them.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Bernice. Any other questions or are there any other subject matter experts who want to add to previous points made or questions referred to other SMEs? Cool. Any other questions from the task force before we jump into breakout rooms? Awesome. So we'll just to give an overview of what we'll do in the breakout rooms, we'll be able to get more time with the subject matter experts in regarding our particular fields and focus for the particular subcommittees. So the community quality of life, we'll get to hear more from Ms. Baldwin. Alternative methods in response, responses, we'll hear more from Bernice and Mark. And then Captain Frischkorn, if you're planning to join with us through the breakout rooms, you'll get to hear more from that group as well. And then community engagement and transparency, we'll get to connect more with Donna and Deputy Chief Powell. So what I have dropped in the chat is a link to the breakout session. So if everyone who's in this discussion can click that link and join us at the breakouts.
Jamal, I'm on a phone, not a computer. Can you direct me to find that?
Yep, if you click the chat button, the little box.
I don't see a chat button, actually.
Awesome. Would it be better if I emailed you or texted to you?
To email me what?
The link to the breakout room.
Texting might work, Mark. That way you click on the link and you're straight there.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Bernice?
If you text it, if you get a text to you, you can click on the link and then you go straight to the room.
Okay, all right, so let's try a text.
Oh,
I'll let you get to the.
switch all the
Mhm.
Jacqueline. So my colleague Jacqueline will work with you, Mark, to ensure that that link goes over. Jacqueline, good to stay here with Mark. and get that
Yes,
link over.
absolutely. I'll grab that from him and make sure everything is stopped recording and it's not live before we grab that number.
Awesome.
Is there a different link for each room?
That's what I need to know.
No,
No,
there
just-
is not.
Yeah, just
Oh,
click.
this will be put into separate rooms in a bit. Mark, on your phone, do you see 3 buttons at the bottom that says more?
There's 4 buttons on the bottom.
You should see one that says like ... more. Do you see that? Or you can tell me what the buttons at the bottom say for you.
They don't say anything. I mean, one of them seems sort of lit up. They're not buttons, they're little dots, and there's 4 of them, and the second one is kind of lit up.
Okay. And everybody else on this call, are you able to switch over as well?
No, Molly, I'm looking for my breakout room. I'm looking at the chat. Which one is it? I'm seeing some different.
No problem. I will repost it. One moment. Having just some technical difficulties myself. So you're just going to click this one. And once you're over there, Jamal will put you into separate breakout groups. All right. So you should see something flashing on your right now.
See something flashing.
So if you're on a phone, it'll usually it'll say like there's something in the chat. Are you on a phone or computer?
No, I'm on my computer. I'm just saying.